The emergency beacon cut through space like a desperate scream, broadcasting on every available frequency across the galaxy. The Zephyrians had spent their last functioning power cells to send out the distress call, their homeworld of Zephyrs Prime burning behind them as the Verkari invasion fleet tore through their defenses like paper. Commander Veltar's forearms trembled as he activated the Universal Translator, his crystalline eyes reflecting the orange glow of his dying world. The message was simple, transmitted in the ancient galactic standard that all civilized species understood. To any who can hear this transmission, the peaceful world of Zephyrs Prime is under attack by the Verkari Dominion. We are a scientific colony with no military capabilities. Our population of 12 million civilians faces extinction within solar cycles. We offer our entire planetary research archives and technological databases to any civilization willing to provide military assistance. Please, if there is mercy in the universe, help us. The transmission rocketed across space, bouncing off relay stations and amplification buoys scattered throughout the galaxy. Most civilized species received it with the same resigned helplessness they had shown for the past decade. The Verkari Dominion had been expanding aggressively, consuming smaller civilizations like a cosmic plague. Their warrior culture viewed conquest as religious duty, and their technology was centuries ahead of most galactic neighbors. The Altarian Republic received the message first, their monitoring stations picking up the signal within hours. High Counselor Zexon read the translated text with mounting dread. The Altarians had lost 3 colonies to the Verkari in the past year alone, their peacekeeping fleets shattered against Verkari battle cruisers. They had neither the military strength nor the political will to engage the Dominion again. The Crystalline Collective detected the transmission next, their hive mind consciousness processing the information instantaneously across 1,000 worlds. They had attempted to negotiate with the Verkari once, offering technological exchanges and trade agreements. The Verkari response had been to glass 2 of their mining worlds from orbit. The collective had retreated deeper into their territory, hoping isolation would spare them from further aggression. The Stellar Federation's monitoring post on Kepler 442c recorded the message third. Admiral THYSS of the Federation Navy studied the tactical reports with clinical detachment. The Federation had the largest military force in the known galaxy, but even they avoided direct confrontation with the Verkari. 3 major engagements had taught them that Verkari ships were faster, more heavily armed, and commanded by warriors who viewed death in battle as the highest honor. The political cost of another devastating defeat would topple the current government. One by one, every major galactic power acknowledged the distress call and filed it away in their databases. Some sent formal condolences to the Zephyrian government. Others made token offers of refugee assistance, knowing full well that the Verkari left no survivors. The message was forwarded through diplomatic channels, discussed in emergency sessions, and ultimately dismissed as another tragic casualty of Verkari expansion. The transmission continued its journey through space, automated relay stations dutifully amplifying and redirecting the signal according to their programming. It bounced off the massive communications array on Station Omega-7, threading through a navigation beacon near the Horsehead Nebula, and eventually reached the outer rim of a relatively quiet spiral arm of the galaxy. Here, the signal encountered something unprecedented in the known galaxy. A species that had never heard of the Verkari Dominion, had no concept of appropriate galactic protocol, and possessed a disturbing tendency to respond to distress calls with overwhelming force. The transmission reached Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station Luna 3 at 1427 Greenwich Mean Time on a Tuesday. Communications specialist Sarah Chun was halfway through her coffee when the automated systems began screaming alerts. The signal was unlike anything in their databases, clearly artificial, obviously alien, and broadcasting on frequencies that Earth scientists had only theorized about. Chin's hands flew over her controls, isolating the transmission and running it through every decryption algorithm Earth possessed. The universal translator protocols built into the signal made the process surprisingly straightforward. Within minutes, she was staring at a decoded message that made her coffee grow cold in her hands. She read it 3 times before reaching for the emergency phone. "Director Morrison? You need to see this. Now." Director James Morrison arrived at Luna 3 within 6 hours, having commandeered the fastest shuttle available from Earth. He read the decoded message in silence, his weathered face growing darker with each word. "How far?" he asked finally. Shin pulled up the stellar cartography display. "The signal source is approximately 47 light-years from Earth. Based on the transmission timestamp and the distance traveled, the attack is happening right now." Morrison studied the display, his mind racing through possibilities. First contact with an alien species, and it was a distress call. The political implications alone would keep the UN Security Council in session for months. But 47 light-years, even with humanity's newly developed faster-than-light capability, the journey would take weeks. "What do we know about this Vakari Dominion?" Morrison asked. "Nothing," Chin admitted. "This is our first indication that any of these civilizations exist. But, based on the message content, they appear to be aggressively expansionist." Morrison nodded slowly. He had spent 30 years in Earth's military before transitioning to civilian space administration. He recognized the tone of the message, the desperate formality of a military commander trying to maintain composure while his world burned around him. "Give me Admiral Patterson," he said. "Emergency priority." The call to Earth took 18 minutes due to the current planetary alignment. Admiral Patricia Patterson, Supreme Commander of the United Earth Defense Force, listened to Morrison's report with growing alarm. "You're certain the translation is accurate?" she asked. "We've run it through 12 different protocols. The message is genuine, Admiral. 12 million civilians are facing extinction, and they've asked for help." Patterson was quiet for a long moment. In the background, Morrison could hear the controlled chaos of the UEDF command center. Earth had been preparing for the possibility of hostile alien contact since the development of FTL travel. But this scenario had never been considered. Aliens asking humanity for help. "I'll need to brief the President and the Security Council," Patterson said finally. "But, James, if we do respond, we can't send a token force. From what you've described, these Vakari are a significant military threat. Any deployment would have to assume we're entering a war." Morrison understood the implication. Earth's military doctrine had evolved from centuries of human conflict, built on principles of rapid deployment, overwhelming firepower, and total commitment to mission success. If humanity decided to answer the Zephyrian distress call, they wouldn't send a single ship or a small task force. They would send an army. The emergency session of the UN Security Council convened 8 hours later. Representatives from every major nation crowded into the secure chamber beneath UN headquarters, their faces grim as Director Morrison presented his findings. The decoded message played 3 times in absolute silence. Chinese Representative Li Wei spoke first. "The humanitarian implications are clear. 12 million civilians face extinction. However, we must consider the strategic ramifications of involving ourselves in an alien conflict." Russian Representative Volkov nodded agreement. "We know nothing about the political situation. For all we know, this peaceful colony could be a military outpost using civilian populations as human shields." British Representative Hamilton disagreed. "The message specifically mentions research archives and technological databases. This appears to be a genuine scientific colony under attack by an aggressive military force." The debate continued for hours, covering every conceivable angle. Some representatives argued for caution, suggesting a reconnaissance mission to gather intelligence before committing to military action. Others insisted that any delay would render assistance meaningless. President Martinez listened to the arguments with growing impatience. She had spent 6 years as a Marine Corps officer before entering politics, and she recognized the fundamental question underlying the debate. Was humanity willing to fight for people they had never met, on a world they had never seen, against an enemy they knew nothing about? Finally, she stood. The chamber fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing the first contact between humanity and alien civilizations. The nature of that contact will define our species' relationship with the galaxy for generations to come. Do we want to be known as the species that ignored a cry for help because it was inconvenient? Or do we want to be known as the species that answered when innocent people called for help?" She paused, letting her words sink in. The Verkari Dominion has never heard of humanity. They have no idea what we're capable of. That gives us a significant tactical advantage, but only if we act quickly. I'm authorizing Operation Distant Thunder. Admiral Patterson, you have full authorization to deploy whatever forces you deem necessary. Admiral Patterson had been prepared for this possibility. The UEDF had been conducting theoretical exercises for hostile alien contact scenarios for the past 5 years. Operation Distant Thunder had been her personal project, a rapid deployment protocol designed to project Earth's military power across interstellar distances. Within hours, every major UEDF facility was buzzing with activity. The 1st Expeditionary Fleet, humanity's most advanced deep space combat force, began immediate preparation for deployment. 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, 8 assault carriers, and for logistics vessels, supported by 200 strike fighters and 30,000 of Earth's most elite soldiers. But Admiral Patterson had learned from studying Earth's military history. The greatest victories had been won not through superior technology, but through unconventional thinking and overwhelming commitment. The Verkari expected resistance from civilized galactic powers bound by diplomatic protocols and limited by political considerations. They would not expect what humanity was about to send them. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the UES Avalanche, the fleet's flagship, and watched the final preparations with grim satisfaction. Around her, the 1st Expeditionary Fleet hung in space like a constellation of war, their hulls bristling with weapons systems that had never been tested against alien technology. All ships report ready for FTL jump, her communications officer announced. Santos nodded to Admiral Patterson, who had chosen to accompany the fleet personally. This was too important for remote command. Signal the fleet, Patterson ordered. All ships, prepare for jump to Zephyrs Prime. Remember, people, we're not just representing Earth today. We're representing humanity's first contact with the galaxy. Let's make sure we make the right impression. The FTL drives engaged simultaneously, 39 human warships disappearing into the quantum foam that separated normal space from faster-than-light travel. Behind them, Earth's orbital shipyards worked around the clock to prepare the 2nd and 3rd Expeditionary Fleets for deployment. The Zephyrian distress call had been answered. The Verkari were about to learn why you should be careful who you threaten in a galaxy full of unknown species. 47 light-years away, Commander Veltar huddled in his emergency bunker as Verkari bombardment turned the surface of his world into molten glass. His distress beacon had been broadcasting for 18 hours with no response. He had begun to accept that his people would die alone, another forgotten footnote in the Verkari's campaign of conquest. He did not know that help was coming. He did not know that the help would arrive in the form of a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of war. He did not know that the Verkari Dominion was about to encounter humanity for the first time. And he certainly did not know that this first encounter would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The human fleet raced through quantum space toward a world they had never seen, to fight an enemy they had never met, for people they had never encountered. It was, Admiral Patterson reflected, perhaps the most human response possible to a cry for help. They were coming, and they were bringing everything they had. The Verkari war leader Kethvar stood on the command bridge of the massive dreadnought Bloodfang, watching with satisfaction as his fleet reduced another primitive world to ash and slag. The Zephyrians had proven disappointingly weak, their few defensive satellites destroyed within the first hour of engagement. Now his ships took turns bombarding the surface, methodically eliminating population centers and infrastructure. Kethvar's scarred face showed the ritual markings of his warrior caste, each scar representing a successful conquest. At 12 feet tall and weighing nearly half a ton of muscle and bone, he embodied the Verkari ideal of military perfection. His race had evolved on a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived, and they had carried that philosophy into space with devastating effectiveness. War leader, his tactical officer announced, surface resistance has ceased. The remaining population centers are attempting to surrender. Kethvar's lipless mouth curved in what might have been a smile. There is no surrender. Continue bombardment until the surface is cleansed. Then, we will establish mining operations on the ruins. The tactical officer nodded and relayed the orders. Around them, the Verkari fleet of 37 warships continued their methodical destruction. This was their way. Complete annihilation of military opposition followed by the systematic extermination of civilian populations. Fear was a weapon as effective as any plasma cannon, and the Verkari wielded it with surgical precision. War leader, the communications officer called out, "We are receiving multiple FTL signatures approaching the system. Range, 43 million kilometers, and closing." Kethvar turned, his interest piqued. The Zephyrians had no allies, and no galactic power had been foolish enough to challenge Verkari expansion in recent years. Identify the signatures. Unknown configuration, war leader. The quantum disturbance patterns do not match any known FTL technology in our databases. This was interesting. Kethvar had been hoping for some entertainment during this tedious extermination. Perhaps another species had finally found the courage to face the Dominion in battle. "How many ships?" he asked. 39 confirmed contacts. Mixed tonnage, but the energy signatures suggest significant military capability. Kethvar felt the familiar surge of anticipation that preceded battle. 39 ships was a respectable force, enough to provide genuine sport. Most galactic powers sent token resistance, barely enough to satisfy Verkari honor codes. This promised to be more entertaining. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Form battle formation Alpha. Prepare to engage unknown hostiles." The Verkari ships moved with practiced efficiency, their dark hulls bristling with weapon ports and armor plating. They had fought 100 campaigns across the galaxy, and their tactical doctrine was refined by constant warfare. They would engage at maximum range, using their superior firepower to destroy the enemy fleet piece by piece. "War leader," the tactical officer reported. "The unknown fleet is dropping out of FTL at the system's edge. They're not approaching." Kethvar frowned. Standard galactic procedure called for immediate engagement when responding to a distress signal. Most species would attempt a direct attack on the Verkari fleet, hoping to break the siege through superior firepower or tactical surprise. "What are they doing?" he demanded. "They appear to be deploying. The larger vessels are launching smaller craft. We're detecting what looks like fighter squadrons and..." "War leader, some of those energy signatures are consistent with troop transports." Kethvar's confusion deepened. Troop transports made no sense. The surface of Zephy's Prime was already compromised, and any ground assault would be suicide against established Verkari positions. Unless they're planning a ground invasion, he realized. They intend to retake the planet. His bridge crew exchanged glances. In 1,000 years of Verkari expansion, no enemy had ever attempted to retake a world the Dominion had claimed. The very concept was outside their understanding of galactic warfare. "Should we engage them before they can deploy, war leader?" the tactical officer asked. Kethvar considered. The unknown fleet was maintaining position at the system's edge, while outside effective weapons range. His ships could close the distance, but that would leave the planetary siege vulnerable to interference. And he was genuinely curious to see what these aliens thought they could accomplish with a ground assault. "Maintain current position," he ordered. "Let them come to us. When they realize the futility of their assault, they will be forced to engage our fleet directly." In the depths of space, the human First Expeditionary Fleet had completed its tactical deployment. Admiral Patterson stood in the flag bridge of the UES Avalanche, studying the holographic display that showed the Verkari fleet in precise detail. Human sensor technology, developed from decades of military paranoia and scientific curiosity, was proving superior to anything the Verkari possessed. "Tactical assessment," she ordered. Commander Hayes, the fleet's intelligence officer, activated the detailed analysis. 37 hostile vessels, Admiral. Mix of battleships, cruisers, and destroyer-class ships. Their energy signatures suggest plasma-based weaponry and conventional fusion drives. No obvious stealth capability, and their formation indicates standard line-of-battle tactics. Defensive capabilities? Energy shields of unknown configuration, but the frequency analysis suggests they're vulnerable to focused kinetic impact. Heavy armor plating, but, again, nothing our penetrator rounds can't handle. Admiral Patterson nodded. The Verkari fleet was larger than her force, but size meant nothing if you couldn't hit your target. Human military doctrine emphasized speed, precision, and overwhelming firepower concentrated at decisive points. The Verkari appeared to favor the direct approach. "They're not engaging," Captain Santos observed. "They're holding position around the planet. They think we're going to charge directly at their fleet," Admiral Patterson realized. "They don't understand what we're planning." General Marcus Williams, commander of the Expeditionary Ground Forces, smiled grimly. "Let them keep thinking that, Admiral. My Marines are ready to show them what humans do to planet killers." The human plan was ambitious to the point of recklessness. While the Verkari expected a traditional fleet engagement, humanity intended to conduct the largest amphibious assault in their species' history. 8 assault carriers had deployed their entire complement of ground forces, 30,000 Marines, Rangers, and special operations personnel, supported by atmospheric fighters and orbital bombardment from the fleet. "Commence Operation Overlord," Admiral Patterson ordered. The assault began with a coordinated strike from 200 human fighters, sleek craft that accelerated past the speed of sound within seconds of launch. They dove towards Zephyrs Prime from multiple vectors, their pilots trained in atmospheric combat tactics that no galactic power had ever considered necessary. Kethvar watched the incoming fighters with growing confusion. What are they attempting to accomplish? Those craft cannot possibly threaten our ground installations. His confusion turned to alarm as the human fighters began their attack runs. Instead of engaging Verkari ships directly, they targeted the orbital bombardment platforms that had been systematically destroying the planet's surface. Precise missile strikes and kinetic projectiles tore through Verkari installations that had never been designed to defend against atmospheric attack. "They're neutralizing our bombardment capability," the tactical officer reported with disbelief. "War leader, they're protecting the planet's surface." This violated every principle of galactic warfare that Kethvar understood. Orbital bombardment was the most effective way to control planetary surfaces. No rational military commander would prioritize surface protection over fleet engagement. "Deploy fighters to intercept," he ordered. "Show these fools what happens when they challenge Verkari air superiority." The Verkari launched their own fighter squadrons, heavily armed craft designed for ship-to-ship combat in the vacuum of space. They descended into Zephyrs Prime's atmosphere with confidence, expecting easy victories against the smaller human fighters. The first Verkari pilot to engage a human F-47 Raptor died without understanding what killed him. Lieutenant Sarah Kim rolled her fighter through a high-G turn that would have crushed most alien physiology, acquired target lock on the Verkari craft, and fired a burst from her rotary cannon that shredded the enemy fighter's cockpit. "Tally 1, she announced calmly, already maneuvering to engage her next target. Across the planet's upper atmosphere, human pilots demonstrated the advantage of being evolved for three-dimensional combat. Their fighters were smaller, faster, and more maneuverable than anything the Verkari had encountered. More importantly, their pilots had been trained in atmospheric combat since childhood, fighting in an environment where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. The Verkari fighter squadrons were annihilated within 30 minutes. Kethvar stared at the tactical display in growing rage. Half his atmospheric fighters were gone, destroyed by an enemy that fought like nothing in the Dominion's experience. These humans used the planet's atmosphere itself as a weapon, diving and climbing through pressure layers while maintaining precise fire control. "War leader," his communications officer called out, "we're detecting massive energy buildups from the human fleet. They appear to be charging some kind of bombardment weapon." On the UES Avalanche, Admiral Patterson watched the final preparations with grim satisfaction. "All ships, prepare for precision orbital bombardment. Target only confirmed for Verkari ground positions. Civilian areas are off limits." The human fleet had positioned itself in a perfect orbital bombardment formation, their ships' railguns and particle beam weapons trained on every Verkari installation on the planet's surface. But, unlike the Verkari's indiscriminate destruction, human targeting systems could distinguish between military and civilian targets with surgical precision. "Fire," Admiral Patterson ordered. Kinetic projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed hammered into Verkari ground installations. Each shot was precisely calibrated to destroy its target without causing collateral damage to surrounding areas. "Command bunkers, weapon emplacements, and supply depots vanished in coordinated explosions while nearby Zephyrian structures remained untouched. The bombardment lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it ended, every Verkari ground installation on Zephy's Prime had been eliminated. "Deploy the landing force," Admiral Patterson ordered. The assault carriers opened their massive bay doors, disgorging hundreds of drop pods that fell toward the planet's surface like artificial meteors. Each pod contained a squad of human marines, soldiers trained for rapid deployment and immediate combat effectiveness in any environment. General Williams rode in the lead pod, watching through the tiny viewport as Zephy's Prime grew larger below him. The planet's surface was scarred by Verkari bombardment, but human intelligence had identified several intact population centers where Zephyrian civilians had taken shelter. The pods hit the surface in a coordinated pattern that established immediate territorial control around every major population center. As the smoke cleared, 30,000 human soldiers emerged from their pods and began the largest rescue operation in galactic history. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez kicked open his pod's emergency hatch and immediately assessed his surroundings. His squad had landed in what appeared to be a Zephyrian city square, the elegant crystalline architecture damaged but still standing. In the distance, he could see the smoke rising from destroyed Verkari positions. "Squad, sound off," he ordered into his helmet. "Comm, Alpha Team, operational. Bravo Team, ready to move. Charlie Team, locked and loaded, Sergeant." Rodriguez smiled behind his helmet visor. His boys were good. 3 tours of duty in Earth's various conflicts had taught them to work as a seamless unit. "Movement to our north," Corporal Chun reported. "Looks like civilians coming out of that building." Rodriguez turned to see a group of Zephyrians emerging from what appeared to be a reinforced shelter. They moved cautiously, their 4 arms held in what human intelligence had identified as a peaceful gesture. The largest of them approached Rodriguez's position, stopping at a respectful distance. Rodriguez activated his universal translator and removed his helmet, showing his human face to the aliens. "I'm Sergeant Rodriguez, United Earth Defense Force. We received your distress call." The aliens' crystalline eyes widened with what might have been shock. You came. You actually came." "Yes, sir, we did. Are you military personnel?" "I am Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian Defense Force. But our military was destroyed in the first hours of the attack. These are all civilians." Rodriguez nodded. "How many survivors are we talking about, Commander?" "Perhaps 3 million across the planet. But the Verkari have orbital superiority. Even if you rescue us, how will you evacuate so many people?" Rodriguez grinned. "Commander, with all due respect, you asked for help. You didn't ask us to evacuate anybody. We're here to take your planet back." Around the planet, similar scenes were playing out as human forces made contact with Zephyrian survivors. The aliens' amazement at humanity's response was universal. No galactic power had ever attempted to liberate a world from Verkari occupation. In orbit, Kethvar watched the deployment with growing fury. His ground forces were gone, his bombardment platforms destroyed, and somehow an entire enemy army had appeared on the planet's surface without engaging his fleet. "War leader," his tactical officer reported nervously, "the humans are not withdrawing. They appear to be establishing permanent defensive positions around civilian population centers." "That's impossible," Kethvar snarled. "They cannot maintain those positions without orbital support. The moment we engage their fleet, their ground forces will be cut off and destroyed." But even as he spoke, the war leader felt a growing unease. These humans had demonstrated tactical thinking unlike anything in the Dominion's experience. They had somehow turned a siege into a liberation, destroyed his ground forces without engaging his fleet, and deployed an army that showed no signs of attempting to withdraw. "Signal the human fleet," he ordered. "Demand their immediate surrender or face complete annihilation." The response came 30 minutes later, transmitted on the same frequency the Zephyrians had used for their distress call. The image that appeared on the Verkari main screen showed a human female in military uniform, standing in what was obviously the bridge of a warship. "This is Admiral Patterson of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said calmly. "I am responding to your surrender demand. Here are our terms. Withdraw your fleet from this system immediately, or we will destroy every Verkari ship present. You have 1 hour to comply." The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar staring at the blank screen in speechless rage. In 1,000 years of conquest, no enemy had ever demanded Verkari surrender. "War leader," his communications officer said hesitantly, "should we respond?" Kethvar's response was a roar that echoed through the ship's corridors. "All ships, prepare for immediate attack. These arrogant mammals will learn what happens to those who threaten the Dominion." The Verkari fleet began moving toward the human ships, their weapons charging for what Kethvar intended to be a brief and decisive engagement. He did not know that he was about to discover why humanity had never lost a war they were committed to winning. Admiral Patterson watched the approaching Verkari fleet with clinical detachment. Her tactical display showed 37 hostile vessels closing distance at what she assumed was their maximum acceleration. Their formation was textbook perfect, a classic wall of battle designed to maximize firepower while protecting their heavier units. "They're coming straight at us," Captain Santos observed. "No attempt at tactical maneuvering." "They don't think they need it," Patterson replied. "Look at that formation. They're confident in their ability to overpower us through superior firepower alone." She turned to her communications officer. "Signal all ships. Execute Plan Delta 7. The human fleet had spent the past hour in what appeared to be standard defensive formation, their ships clustered around the massive assault carriers in a protective screen. The Verkari had interpreted this as evidence of human defensive thinking, expecting a static engagement where firepower would determine the outcome. They were about to learn the first rule of fighting humans. Nothing was ever as simple as it appeared. The moment Patterson's order was transmitted, the human fleet exploded into motion. The heavy cruisers and destroyers accelerated away from the carriers in multiple directions, their fusion drives pushing them to velocities that made the Verkari fleet look sluggish by comparison. Within minutes, the humans had abandoned their defensive formation entirely. On the Verkari flagship, Kethvar watched the display with growing confusion. "What are they doing?" "They're scattering their forces." "War leader," his tactical officer reported, "the human ships are faster than anticipated. Their acceleration curves exceed our projections by a significant margin." Kethvar studied the tactical display, trying to understand the human strategy. Their ships were spreading out across the system in what appeared to be random directions. Some were diving toward the system's star, others climbing out of the orbital plane, and a few were actually accelerating directly toward the Verkari fleet. "Maintain formation," he ordered. "When they engage, we will destroy them piece by piece." He did not understand that the humans had already begun their attack. Captain Chun of the UES Tempest brought her heavy cruiser around in a high-G turn that would have liquefied most alien crew members. Her ship was one of 12 that had broken away from the main formation, accelerating toward what appeared to be an intercept course with the Verkari fleet. "Weapons," she announced. "Prepare for kinetic bombardment. Target the lead Verkari battleship." "Aye, Captain." "Kinetic rounds loaded and ready. Range to target, 18 million kilometers, and closing." The Verkari would expect engagement at traditional combat ranges, perhaps 2 or 3 million kilometers at most. Human weapons, however, had been designed with Earth's particular brand of paranoia in mind. If an enemy ship could be detected, human doctrine demanded that it could be destroyed. "Fire," Chen ordered. The Tempest's main railgun system fired a burst of tungsten projectiles accelerated to 12% of light speed. At this range, the projectiles would take nearly 2 minutes to reach their target, but their velocity made them effectively undetectable until the moment of impact. Across the system, 11 other human cruisers fired similar volleys. Kethvar was still trying to understand the human tactical deployment when his flagship's armor exploded inward. The kinetic projectile that struck the Bloodfang carried the energy equivalent of a tactical nuclear weapon, punching through Verkari shields and armor as if they were paper. "Damage report," he roared, pulling himself up from where the impact had thrown him. "Direct hit to forward section 7. We've lost primary power coupling to the main weapons array." Around the Bloodfang, 6 other Verkari ships were reporting similar damage. The human attack had come from ranges that Verkari doctrine considered impossible, striking simultaneously from multiple vectors with weapons that no galactic power possessed. "Return fire. All ships, target the approaching human vessels." The Verkari fleet opened fire with plasma cannons and particle beam weapons, launching a devastating barrage toward the incoming human ships. The space between the fleets lit up with weapons fire that would have vaporized most known ships. The weapons passed harmlessly through empty space. Where are they? Kethvar demanded. Where are the human ships? Unknown, war leader. They appear to have changed course. Captain Chen watched the Verkari weapons fire with professional interest. Predictable, she announced. They're firing where we were, not where we are. The human ships had altered course the moment they launched their kinetic volleys, their superior acceleration allowing them to avoid the Verkari response entirely. They were now approaching from completely different vectors, their weapons recharging for another synchronized attack. This was human space combat doctrine in its purest form. Hit hard, hit fast, and never be where the enemy expects you to be. Second volley, prepare to fire, Chen ordered. Target their command ship. The Verkari fleet was in chaos. Half their ships were damaged, their formation was breaking apart, and they couldn't even locate their attackers. Kethvar had fought dozens of campaigns, but this was unlike anything in his experience. War leader, his communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. Not now, Kethvar snapped. Sir, it's from the Verkari ground commander. He reports that human forces are advancing on all population centers simultaneously. Kethvar's attention was split between the space battle and the impossible report from the surface. That's impossible. The humans deployed barely 30,000 troops. Our ground forces number over 200,000. Sir, Ground Commander Vextar reports that the humans are different. They're not fighting like any galactic military he's encountered. On the surface of Zephy's Prime, Vextar was learning firsthand why human military tactics had never been encountered in the galaxy. His forces had been trained for conventional warfare, massed infantry formations, heavy weapons platforms, and artillery bombardments that reduced defensive positions to rubble. The humans fought like ghosts. Staff Sergeant Williams crouched behind the ruins of a Zephyrian building, studying the Verkari defensive position through his rifle scope. The aliens had established a fortified checkpoint blocking the main road to the refugee shelter, with heavy weapons covering all approaches. Standard galactic tactics would call for a frontal assault, accepting heavy casualties to overwhelm the position through superior numbers. Human tactics were considerably more creative. Alpha Team, you see that thermal exhaust port on the left side of their bunker? Williams whispered into his comm, Copy, Sergeant. Looks like ventilation for their heavy weapons. Charlie Team, you've got eyes on the command post. Affirmative. 3 Verkari officers, probably coordinating their defensive fires. Williams smiled. Bravo Team, you ready with that surprise we brought them? Ready and waiting, Sergeant. Execute. The attack began with Corporal Martinez tossing a small device toward the Verkari ventilation system. The device attached itself to the intake port and began releasing a cocktail of tear gas and disorienting chemicals that human scientists had specifically designed to affect Verkari physiology. While the defenders struggled with the unexpected chemical attack, Sniper Johnson put precision rifle fire through the command post, eliminating the Verkari officers with shots that would have been impossible for most galactic species to make. The Verkari defensive position collapsed within minutes, their heavy weapons abandoned as the surviving defenders fled in confusion. Position secure, Williams reported. Casualties: 0 friendly, 12 enemy Kia, approximately 30 enemy WIA, and fleeing. Road to the refugee shelter is clear. Similar engagements were happening across the planet as human forces demonstrated the tactical innovations that came from a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history at war with itself. Every human soldier was trained in small unit tactics, improvised explosives, psychological warfare, and precision marksmanship. They fought like special forces operators, because by galactic standards, they were. General Williams stood in the command center that his forces had established in the center of New Zephyr City, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. His 30,000 troops were systematically dismantling a Verkari occupation force 6 times their size. Sir, his communications officer announced, we're getting reports from all sectors. Enemy resistance is collapsing across the board. Casualty report: 17 wounded, 2 Kia. Enemy losses are estimated at over 3,000 dead, with thousands more wounded or surrendering. General Williams nodded. The numbers were about what he had expected. Human soldiers were expensive to train and equip, but the investment paid off when each individual could function at a level that required platoon-sized units from other species. Signal Admiral Patterson, he ordered. Ground operations are proceeding ahead of schedule. We should have the planet secured within the next 6 hours. In orbit, Admiral Patterson received the ground forces report just as her fleet finished destroying the last functional Verkari warship. The space battle had lasted exactly 43 minutes, leaving 37 Verkari vessels destroyed or disabled without the loss of a single human ship. Signal the surviving Verkari vessels, she ordered. Offer them the opportunity to surrender. The response came from Kethvar himself, transmitted from the crippled bridge of his flagship. The war leader appeared on the main screen, his scarred face twisted with a mixture of rage and something that might have been fear. What are you? He demanded. What species fights like this? Admiral Patterson studied the alien commander with professional interest. We are human, war leader. We come from a world called Earth. Humans. Kethvar tested the word. This is impossible. You are not in our databases. No unknown species possesses this level of military capability. Unknown to you, perhaps, Patterson replied. But we've been perfecting warfare for approximately 50,000 years. You're the first aliens we've had the opportunity to practice on. The implications of this statement seemed to penetrate Kethvar's consciousness slowly. First aliens? You mean, this is your first interstellar conflict? That's correct. We received the Zephyrian distress call 3 days ago. This is our first contact with galactic civilization. Kethvar stared at the screen in stunned silence. A species that had never fought an interstellar war had just destroyed the Verkari Dominion's most powerful expeditionary fleet and liberated a planet with casual efficiency. What do you want? He asked finally. Immediate withdrawal of all Verkari forces from this system, Patterson replied. Cessation of hostilities against the Zephyrian people. And, most importantly, you're going to carry a message back to your Dominion. What message? Patterson's expression hardened. That humanity has joined the galactic community. And we don't appreciate bullies. The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar alone with the wreckage of his fleet and the impossible reality of what had just occurred. The Verkari Dominion had encountered a species that fought warfare as an art form, and they had been found wanting. On the surface of Zephy's Prime, Commander Veltar stood in the ruins of his command center, watching human soldiers distribute medical supplies and emergency rations to Zephyrian refugees. The aliens worked with quiet efficiency, their translators allowing them to communicate directly with the survivors. Commander, Sergeant Rodriguez approached, removing his helmet to show his human face. My medics report that most of your people are in surprisingly good condition, considering the circumstances. The Verkari bombardment was more psychological than effective. Veltar's 4 arms trembled as he processed what had occurred. You actually did it. You liberated our world. Yes, sir, we did. And we're going to help you rebuild. But why? Veltar asked. You don't know us. We have nothing to offer you that would justify such a massive military deployment. Rodriguez paused, considering how to explain human motivation to an alien who had never encountered anything like it. Commander, where we come from, there's a saying, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. You asked for help. We came. But the cost, the resources, the risk to your own people. Commander, Rodriguez interrupted gently. You sent out a distress call saying that 12 million civilians were about to die. That was all we needed to know. 3 hours later, Admiral Patterson stood on the observation deck of the UES Avalanche, watching the last of the Verkari ships disappear into FTL. Around Zephy's Prime, her fleet maintained orbital position while ground forces continued their liberation operations. Admiral, Captain Santos approached with a data pad. Final casualty report from General Williams. Total human losses, for killed in action, 31 wounded. Estimated Verkari losses, 12,000 dead, 8,000 wounded, 15,000 captured or surrendering. Patterson nodded. The numbers were sobering, not because they were high, but because they demonstrated just how unprepared the galaxy was for human military capabilities. Communications, she called out. Prepare a transmission to Earth. Priority Alpha. The message would take several hours to reach Earth, but Patterson knew that President Martinez and the UN Security Council needed to understand what had just occurred. Humanity had not merely won their first interstellar conflict. They had demonstrated a level of military superiority that would fundamentally alter the balance of galactic power. Message prepared, Admiral. Begin transmission. This is Admiral Patterson reporting from Zephyrs Prime. Operation Distant Thunder has concluded successfully. All objectives achieved. Zephyrian population liberated with minimal human casualties. Verkari Expeditionary Fleet destroyed. Request immediate deployment of Second Fleet for system security and Third Fleet for humanitarian operations. Recommend establishment of permanent Earth Defense Force presence in this sector. She paused, considering the full implications of what she was about to say. Admiral Patterson continued. Be advised that human military capabilities appear to significantly exceed all known galactic standards. Recommend immediate preparation for large-scale interstellar operations. The Zephyrian rescue mission is just the beginning. The transmission raced toward Earth at faster-than-light speeds, carrying news that would change human civilization forever. Humanity had answered their first alien distress call with overwhelming force and competence that left their enemies defeated and their new allies amazed. On Earth, President Martinez would read the report and immediately authorize the deployment of additional fleets. The UN Security Council would vote unanimously to establish the Terran Protectorate, a military alliance dedicated to protecting smaller galactic civilizations from aggressive expansion. Within 6 months, 17 different species would request human military assistance. Within a year, the Verkari Dominion would collapse as their subject worlds rebelled under human protection. But none of that had happened yet. For now, Admiral Patterson stood in orbit around an alien world, watching human soldiers distribute medical supplies to grateful refugees while human engineers helped repair damaged infrastructure. Commander Veltar's distress call had been intended to reach any nearby civilization capable of providing assistance. Instead, it had reached a species that considered military excellence a fundamental cultural value and viewed the protection of civilians as a moral imperative. The Verkari had discovered what many of Earth's historical enemies had learned before them. There were few things more dangerous than asking humanity for help and then threatening the people humanity had decided to protect. In the ruins of New Zephyr City, Sergeant Rodriguez helped a young Zephyrian engineer restart the local power grid while his translator worked to overcome the language barrier. Around them, human soldiers and alien civilians worked together to begin the long process of rebuilding a world. It was, Rodriguez thought, exactly what humanity did best, taking something broken and making it work better than it had before. The galaxy had asked for help. An army had answered. And nothing would ever be the same.